Greetings, welcome to Full Record Jacket with Phil and Ben, and on this occasion, Sam. Yes, we've got back Sam Mortley, better known as Shoegazer 93.
What's up, dudes?
He's the man. He knows about his indie from the 90s, even though he was only born in 1993, a mere child.
We were just talking about the 2000s.
We could be on a register just for talking to him.
We've brought Sam on the show. Sam came on the show a little while back to do a shoegaze quiz, and he's such a great follower of the channel and a commenter on particularly our 90s series that we thought it would only be right to bring him on and get his view on the albums we've chosen and really tell us which ones we should have put in. So, Sam, welcome back.
Well, and also, he can put an album in. He can choose an album.
Exactly. Now, you see, obviously, we picked 3 albums each from each year of the 90s, so that gives us a total of 60 albums. But to make a knockout, we need 64. So we're going to give Sam a couple to add in, ones that we criminally overlooked and were absolutely outrageous for not listing on our list. So
the cause.
We'll find that out. Now, should we go through what we chose, or shall we first ask Sam, what do you think of the 90s, Sam? Because you were born in 93. What's your take on it all?
Well, I remember the early 2000s, and obviously there's still a few things that were still around, I think, from the 90s that kind of crossed over to the next decade. So I caught the end of Top of the Pops, and CD UK was still going in the early 2000s.
Oh, CD UK.
Yeah, CD UK.
Love that.
CD UK. Used to go like that. And I just think that, that stuff like that needs to come back, really, because I think loads of people are just looking everywhere, aren't they, online, and it's all split up because of that, fragmented. And I think if there was like a big music show on the major 5 channels, then I think that would get people knowing what's going on, and bands would get big again, and because everyone would be following the same kind of thing.
Get the White Room back.
Yeah. So I do think there's stuff that needs to come back, I think, from the 90s. TFI as well.
Is Jules Holland still a thing?
Yeah, Jules Holland is still going, but it's only only a Christmas special that he does, I think.
They do it. I don't know how often they do it, but they do it from Alexandra Palace now. They don't do it from the same studio. It's a very cool venue that they do it in now. I don't always see it when it's broadcast, but you can go on iPlayer and catch up with them. I mean, they've done a lot of shows, but it doesn't have the same appointment viewing that it used to have amongst music fans.
No, it doesn't have a mix of artists, did it? Because you could put it on one week, you'd have Oasis on, some African tribal stuff, some jazz. There'd be an eclectic mix of stuff.
The last one I saw, we go back a few months now, but they had Florence and the Machine, and then they had Simple Minds, the veteran.
That's
Simple
like us
Minds.
3.
Yeah.
Don't you
was on it, but
forget about me.
In some ways, it was. I had forgotten about Simple Minds until they appeared. But in some ways,
Jim
it was
Kerr, isn't it? Is it Jim Kerr?
It was similar
His
in some ways.
brother Wayne's unfortunate, isn't he?
To what it was. It was a bit
See
like
what you
what
did
it was.
there.
But I guess,
nice one.
is it fair to say? Is it fair to say that the 90s was the last decade where we had something of the same thing that had existed since the start of rock and roll and had existed in the 60s, in the sense that there was a common culture, because all young people.
Rick Beato called it mainly a monoculture. He called it.
Yeah. We're mainly aware of pretty much everything that was going on in mainstream music. So if you were a grunge fan, whether you were a grunge fan or you were a dance music fan or you were just someone who liked the Spice Girls or something, you were still aware of all that other stuff, and it was all
all
there.
Different pockets of stuff.
And you would see those things covered on MTV, or you would hear it on. If you turned on Radio 1, you would hear the grunge stuff. You would hear some of the dancey stuff. You'd hear the cheesy mainstream pop stuff. Everything it was all there. So everyone was sort of aware of the whole culture. Now it seems to have split into so many different artists and so much stuff people making records in people making
so
records
much
in
looking
the
back
bedroom,
as well.
in different. Yeah, different.
Well, Noel Gallagher said about Nebworth, didn't he? He said that Nebworth was the last great gathering of the people because it was before the birth of the internet. You had 250,000 people there in the moment, not on a phone videoing it, not tweeting about it or record. They were there looking at what was going on.
Well, I remember, I've just got a bit of a memory. At one point in the year would have been around 96, and I was working in an office at the company where I'd done an apprenticeship. So this engineering
What's
company.
Ben laughing at there?
In this office, this was before I met Ben. This would have been a few months before that. In that office,
when he had hair, before he met me.
There was me, because of course Ben and I have a different angle on the 90s, because the 90s was Ben's teen years. Okay, so that was his.
And Phil was in his 60s. I was about to say,
Well, You see, my childhood memories.
Virtual high five
80s,
there.
of course.
Thank you.
See, mine was the 80s, because I turned 20 in 92. So when all the Britpop stuff was going on, I was in my early 20s. So I was still young enough to be interested in what was current and everything, and still enjoying it. But it wasn't the teen years for me. It was those early 20s years. So maybe it's a slightly different.
It wasn't your formative years of locking onto an artist, was it?
It's a different angle. And in some ways, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed current music in the 80s. I don't think there was anything. It wasn't as exciting in the 80s to me. But anyway, that aside, I remember working in this office, and there was a few of us that talked about music in this office. So there was a guy who was slightly younger. So I would have been, let's say I was 23, right? There was a guy who was slightly younger than me, who was a guitarist in a band. So he was kind of a cool guy who was into the music, and he was, younger than me. There was a guy who was older than me, but he was only about 28. But he seemed a little bit older at that time. Yeah, he seemed a little bit older because he'd just got married. He'd got married and everything, so he was a little bit older.
At 23?
No, 28 he was.
Oh, 28.
He was 28. He just got married, but he was interested in Oasis, and he was enjoying Oasis and a lot of the stuff. And then there was another guy in the office who was. He seemed really old at the time, but when I think back to it now, he's probably about the same age that I am now, right?
Really old.
Yeah, really, really old. So he must have been like.
Got yourself a hole
50s,
there, Phil.
Right. He may have been older. He may have been later 50s, but he was in his 50s anyway, so he went back further. But we have conversations about Top of the Pops. So I remember when Oasis were on Top of the Pops.
I remember
we haven't
back
talked
in my
about
day.
it, and so we all kind of enjoyed it. And even the older guy quite liked it, but he said, I think, Oasis did Don't Look Back in Anger, and the older guy was saying Beatles. It was very Beatley. And I think Blur were on, whether it was the same week, I don't know. And he was saying the Blur song was like Madness, and it was a bit like a Madness song. I think it might have been Country House or something. And so he was saying that this stuff was, you could see how much it had been very influenced by what had gone before. But we were all interested in it. We were all quite enjoying it, and we all had this common thing. We'd all watched the same thing. Does that happen now with music? Do you get a group of people in their 20s and 40s and 50s all talking about the same music that they watched the night before on TV?
And what you've just done there, Phil, is taken us on a 3-minute journey to get to the question, does everybody sit down and watch the same programmes anymore?
But yeah.
But when I was a kid, like Top of the Pops was a thing you used to sit down to watch. That was like Question of Sport.
Yeah.
Top of the Pops, it was like the only time you were going to see some of these bands, especially if you were just a teenager like myself.
Yeah. And I remember, in the
a big
80s, they started...
Yeah.
They started showing more of the videos in the early 80s, because when Duran started making these very big budget videos, and then Michael Jackson, etc., then Top of the Pops also became a vehicle. In the UK, MTV didn't take off as quickly as it did in America, did it? It wasn't until cable TV came in, really, was it, that people had NTL and everything,
VH1 and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so originally watching BBC Top of the Pops was the way that you saw some of these videos, and so people would all watch Top of the Pops to see the new Michael Jackson video or whatever.
They were massive.
And then in the 90s, of course, it was a mixture of that, but they were also encouraging the bands to appear on the show, weren't they? And in some cases,
yeah, but not to sing live, as Oasis did comically do with Roll With It, where Noel took lead vocals.
That's right. Didn't they sometimes, I can't remember the history of it now, but there was a period on Top of the Pops when they, for a long time, there was a lot of just miming to the record in the studio and the people dancing. And then they decided to start having a live vocal. And I think that might have been in response to the whole Milli Vanilli thing. Do you remember that?
I do remember Milli Vanilli, where they didn't sing any of the records. Do you know Milli Vanilli are, Sam?
Do you remember them, Sam? They were two American guys. Were there two of them? I think they were, weren't they?
There was two of them, yeah.
They were kind of, they had dreadlocks, and they were kind of marketed as this cool soul kind of duo, soul pop duo. But they were produced by, is it Harold Faltermeyer?
Something like that, yeah.
Is it the guy
they built
who
this massive career, didn't they?
It was the guy who produced, in the 70s, Boney M. So the Boney M group, they made these disco records, and not all of the people who appeared publicly were actually singing on the records. Right. Yeah.
I thought he was showing a vinyl.
I think with it was the German producer who had produced all those.
It was because weren't they German? I think they were German or German American.
They were
weren't they?
They were German American, and the women on it. One of the female voices on the Boney M records was actually the producer's voice speeded up to sound like a woman, stuff like that. But anyway, he produced this duo Milli Vanilli, and it turned out that these two guys had not sung on the recordings at all, and they'd used session singers or whatever. So they won, I think, a Grammy for something.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And then when it transpired that they'd not ever sung on any of their records, they ended up being shamed into giving back the Grammy, and there was a big thing about fakeness in music. So they then Top of the Pops, I think, decided to start having some live performances. But I remember there was also a thing when back in the 50s and 60s when musicians appeared on TV.
Old age concern alerts.
There was a musician. I seem to remember at one point there was a. I'm ignoring it. There was a musicians' union thing where they weren't allowed to mime to the original record. They had to go in and re-record the song, do a new performance of the song, and then mime to
Taylor
that.
Swift has survived back in those days.
Bit of an effort, isn't it?
I mean, nowadays it's all. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the live shows now, the so-called live shows, there's a lot of miming and auto-tuning.
You can't dance like that and still sing at the top of your...
None of them can. And this has been shown with loads of these pop stars, they don't dance and sing at the same time. But we're going off topic with the 90s now.
We are, yeah. Now back to the 90s, Philster.
So really, Sam, for you, the 90s are kind of like the way I see the 60s and the 70s, because those were the decades that I only really knew them through hearing records and looking back and being interested in the history. I don't really remember them properly. I have vague memories of some of the 70s from being a child, but that's like, seeing ABBA on TV or things like that. But I don't have any memory of glam rock or the Sex Pistols or anything like that.
Yeah, well, like I said, a lot of the bands were still quite big in the 2000s. Oasis was still going. So I remember like Lila coming out in 2005. I remember Heathen Chemistry. I remember
2005, yeah.
Radiohead and that were big in the 2000s in Rainbows and stuff. And Hail to the Thief.
Yeah.
Kid A.
And, who else was there? Like Charlatans got big again, didn't they, in the 2000s? And
yeah, they got bigger at 2001. Blur was still going, weren't they?
Although Gorillaz, I think, were
who
bigger
else was still
at that
going?
point. I think Gorillaz was like, that was Damon's #1 project by then. They did that Think Tank album. That was the last one they did, wasn't it? 2003. But I don't think, was it Albarn wasn't on it, or was it Coxon wasn't on it? It wasn't like a full band thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the 90s. I think I like how the guitar came back in the 90s. I heard the 80s stuff as a kid, and parents were playing a lot of that. The power ballads and that. I hated the drum. I hated the drum
pop
sounds. The reverb snare thing and the cheesy synths. A lot of that sounded quite naff and quite plastic.
Yeah.
And then the 90s had this kind of like in all of the guitar genres anyway. Had this wash of guitar sound. I really like that. Like it's psychedelic kind of wash to it. A lot of detail in the guitar work. In the sonics of it.
Yeah, and a lot of detail that people don't pick up on, isn't it? Especially with the shoegaze stuff as well.
That was good for the sonics. Yeah.
A lot of the indie stuff, though, the recording, the sort of the techniques used were perhaps more like going back to the 60s or 70s rather than that sort of 80s sound that you talk about. They were more. There was more of a sort of an immediacy, wasn't there, to the sound? It wasn't so processed. It sounded more real in a way. Does that make any sense?
Well, I think it was a lot better as well. I think the technology was there to be even clearer. So, there's a lot of definition, isn't there? It still sounds, you don't really sound that outdated 90s songs, do they? Not some of them do, but not that many, really.
It just...
No, I think those early 90s ones, you can tell, when we did, didn't we, Phil? When we did 1990, 91, I think it was more...
Stuff in the baggy...
The poppy stuff.
Yeah, or the baggy stuff can sound a bit dated. Whereas I think stuff like Shoegaze was definitely pushing forward.
Yeah, if you listen to things like the first Ride album.
That was pushing forward.
Yeah. Like the first Ride album and the first Verve album, they don't sound to me overproduced. They just sound like they plugged the guitars in and they recorded it well. But it doesn't sound like these, like you say, the 80s and these icy sounding drums and all that.
Well, even a lot of that grunge stuff, you listen to Nevermind by Nirvana, it doesn't sound dated. I mean, obviously it sounds a little bit of its time, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
I listen to stuff now from, as I say, if I put on Morning Glory, that is almost 30 years old. That'd like me be listening to something in 1996 or 1966. Herman's Hermits or something like that. The Herman's Hermits in 1996 would have sounded dated, very, very dated. There's a lot of stuff from that period.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff from the 90s, when you listen to it, doesn't... Obviously, that early 90s sound where there's that crossover from the synths and all this sort of stuff. But once you got into that sort of mid-90s period, there's a lot of stuff from there. I was listening to Republica the other day. That could easily come out now. It doesn't sound of its time, if you know what I mean. There's nothing in there that goes, oh, yeah, this is... you listen to things like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, and that. They're sort of unconsciously rooted in the 70s in my head. There's like a lot of that 90s stuff, and I think that's why the decade is still as popular today as it was then, because it was a popular decade, because it was a decade everybody was living in, is because it hasn't... It does have a lot of it does have a slightly timeless feel to it, in a way.
Yeah.
God, I've gone all philosophical. Ooh, I need a drink.
Well, what was I listening to the other day? I listened to that band who are considered quite cool at the moment, Fontaine's DC.
Yes.
And it was okay. I quite enjoyed it. I've not got deeply into it yet. Maybe I will. But when I listened to that, in terms of the production and the sound, to me, it could have been made in the 90s. It doesn't sound that different. There hasn't been a huge sonic advance.
Yeah, that's really what I was going to say. No. There hasn't been a big, like 60s to 90s, there was a big sonic advance, but between the 90s and 2020s, there hasn't been much progress, I guess. And it's like PlayStation games and stuff like that, It's like you get to a certain level of graphics, and then you can't really go any higher, sort of that kind of thing.
No, and the human ear is only going to hear what it's going to hear. And if you're catering for the common man, like us three, who can't afford £30,000 turntables and stuff, you can't make things, what they're going to do, start making records out of water. And, it's just not going to...
We can't afford a Dolby
Atmos.
I
do listen to a lot of... I had Radio 2 on at work the other day, because I'm of that age. And a lot of the stuff on there, the newer stuff, just sounds void of any real emotion to it. A lot of new pop stuff and that. There's just a real sort of, and whether that's just because of, the generational sort of thing, because being a man in his mid-20s like I am.
Yeah. Is that partly because a lot of the vocals have been pitch corrected and they don't have as much natural rawness in the voices, so that you don't have that emotional connection with them?
I think so. And I think a lot of it as well, for me personally, is when you listen to an album that's got a song that's got 30 different songwriters on it, it doesn't, you can't sing something.
It wouldn't come from a place
God.
of your heart, would it? It wouldn't come from yourself.
Yeah. So, like Richard Ashcroft, say Liam Gallagher, all these people. I know Liam Gallagher didn't write the songs, but he sang them. He was connected to his brother. Richard Ashcroft was right. They had a connection with those tracks. They meant something. They were about growing up and being poor. It wasn't about the fact that you just split with your boyfriend or how big your ass is. It was about something real. There was a proper connection then. And I think that's been lost slightly. I mean, the Arctic Monkeys, when they started, were, they sang with an accent. They talked about going to the pub and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas now they've gone into lounge rock, and it's sort of that. I mean, I'm listening to it. It's over there. It's a great album, The Carb, but it doesn't have that connection like somebody singing about stuff that I would be doing myself, or or songs. I think the 90s was a great period for people writing songs for people like me
about real
that I
life
could relate to.
Yeah.
Are people doing this now, but we don't hear it, or they're not on our radar?
I don't think there is anybody right now in music. There's, especially in the sort of guitar bass scene at the moment, that I can honestly say says anything that connects with the people.
Have you listened to Fontaine's DC though?
I have listened to bits, but they're not gonna bring the people together. They're not, the Arctic Monkeys in a way knitted that mid 2000s together. We all know my feelings on Oasis. They changed. For me, to be a big band of any period, the Beatles and the Stones, they changed the musical direction of the 60s. They formed what then became, people, the 70s, Led Zeppelin and everything. They sort of formed what was then, and everything is sort of
finding the zeitgeist. I think that's what. That's what these days are missing. No one's found the zeitgeist yet.
Well, if you look a few months back, if you look at the level of media coverage and excitement and buzz that was around the announcement of this Oasis reunion, and a lot of the people there are some younger people into that, and there's a lot of people our age groups.
Oh, there's so many young people into that. My nieces and that are mad for it. Literally.
But there should be. It's great that people are getting enthusiastic about Oasis. I don't have any problem with that at all. But there should be a young band of this generation.
But
the younger people are getting just as excited.
Yeah, and you look at the support acts as well, and it's Cast and Richard Ashcroft, isn't it? So it's still old guys supporting them.
Yeah, and it's not to say the bands aren't there, because you've got Inhaler, you've got Sam Fender, people like that. But there's just something, whether it's just because there's so much music available, because, when we were kids, especially me and Phil, unless you owned that CD or spent the time taping it off the radio, you only it's like, even like music videos, the only way you're going to watch that music video, if you caught it at the right time on Top of the Pops. Whereas now, because everything is there all of the time, everything becomes diluted, so therefore nobody's got anything to sort of.
No one has to invest anything in any of it, and it has no scarcity value, because you don't have to spend any of your pocket money on it. You don't have to queue up to get the new album.
When I was, and Phil can testify to this, because I think we were still working together at the time. When we were doing working at the engineering place. Literally, I was on the second op operation, so I was doing all like the manual little jobs. I would have my headphones in, and I'd have Morning Glory on for 8 hours a day, just on repeat, just turning a tape over, back on, back off.
I was about to say, was it my imagination?
No,
it was your.
Or were you listening to Oasis all the time?
Yeah. And to a certain extent, it's almost like having all these vinyl records. Yeah, they're great and they're worth, a fair amount of money. But because I've got that many of them, there's so many to choose from, I never bloody listened to them. Whereas back then, you were invested in it because, yeah, like you said, it took up a lot of your money to buy that album. And I just think now, because in a way, Spotify and all these things have diluted what music is, and it's great if you're an artist. I mean, it's not great if you're an artist because nobody makes any money anymore out of music apart from the record companies. But it's great if you're an artist up and coming because you can get your stuff heard by lots of people. But I just don't think there's anything out there at the moment that is truly going to bring people together, especially when you're thinking that 30 years after Definitely Maybe, that the country and everybody, all the kids now, are dead excited that a band from 30 years ago
it's
are
sad,
reforming.
really, isn't it?
I don't think people in 1996 would have been raving their nuts off thinking Herman's Hermits are reforming. So
no, but if let's say in the 90s, because it was roughly 3 decades after, if the Beatles had got back together right in the 90s, there would have been a massive hype, and there would have been a lot of younger people would have been into it.
I'll tell you what else there would have been, a massive séance.
Yeah, and there would have been a lot of young people into it. There would have been old people going, young people going. It would have been a lot of hype. But in the 90s, we still had bands that young people were flocking to go and see, and as well in big numbers. We don't have.
But I think
that's
the difference, though.
We don't have the young bands creating a phenomenon now. Anyway,
yeah,
certainly.
There was a mystique around the Beatles. They were this band that changed everything. So, well, there wasn't. Back in the 90s, because you didn't know a lot about it. Look, when the anthology came out, nobody really knew about what went on behind closed doors. But and the same with Oasis in the 90s. It's just, I think because they were a massive band and there was this sort of aura about them, they drew people in. I just don't think in 30 years' time people are going to be queuing up for Fontaine's DC reunion gig.
This is true. Yeah, this is probably true.
There was a mystique around the Beatles. There's all the mythology around them, but also, like, if I said to somebody, tell me...
It says
no. It's still recorded on mine.
It says on mine. It just said on mine, Shoegazer has stopped recording, but I can still see Sam, and he's still.
Yeah, you're still there, dude. You're still there. Yeah, and I know. Nor did I. Phil bullied me into it. So, but yeah, I mean, if I said to somebody, "Can you tell me how Fontaine's DC formed?" Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to be able to tell you how they formed. Whereas, like the Beatles and how they got together, and all these other bands, there's a bit of mythology about them, and that's why music's a little bit dead today.
I'm glad you're continuing to talk because Sam has vanished, and
he has vanished.
Need to see whether he will come.
He's coming back. He's back.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, mate.
Just like Oasis, he's come back.
I missed your point there. I think. What were you going to say, Ben?
Or I was just saying about the mythology behind bands. The thing of Paul McCartney and John Lennon meeting at that fete in Liverpool. Alan McGee with Oasis in King Tut's Wah Wah Hut. Yeah, there's all this sort of thing around. Whereas today, it's
everything just goes up on Insta or Instagram,
there's no
Facebook.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the 90s before we divert anymore. You've heard some of the albums that we've chosen. Yep. Are there any that we have put in and made a grave error by?
Yeah, probably
you can
all
remember
60
them all.
Them.
There's 60.
Do you want me to go through? Do you want me to read out the?
Yeah, that
what
would be
we
good.
Did, Ben?
Yeah, if you just quick little rundown. Yeah.
Okay, so 1990.
Ooh,
Let's look at
back
Ben.
in January.
So Ben chose, in no particular order, he went with A Tribe Called Quest, People's Instinctive Travels, and The Path of Rhythm. He also hipped and hopped with MC Hammer and Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em, and Betty Boo's Boo Mania. It was a real hip-hoppy choice for Ben there. I went with veteran stuff, Neil Young and Crazy Horse Ragged Glory. I had Sonic Youth with Goo and Paul Simon's The Rhythm of the Saints. Then 1991, Ben was at Fox Base Alpha with Saint Etienne. He then told us that De La Soul is dead, and Primal Scream's Screamadelica for 91 from Ben. For me, it was three big names from me. Had U2 with Acton Baby, Prince with Diamonds and Pearls, and Guns N' Roses with Use Your Illusion.
Went for another OG one there, didn't you? The old guard choices.
Yeah,
but Ben was really in his hip hop phase, wasn't he?
He was very hip hop.
Yeah.
And MC Hammer.
92, Ben had The Far Side with Bizarre Ride to The Far Side.
Hip hop again. Hip hop heavy.
It was totally crossed out. Crisscross.
Did I go for Crisscross?
You went for Crisscross. I don't know what I've done.
What have I done?
You somewhat redeemed your indie credibility with spiritualized and laser-guided melodies.
I can't believe I put Crisscross in.
What you chose for 92.
Crisscross and MC Hammer. Oh, my good God.
I prevaricated a bit over one of my choices for that year, but then I went with REM, Automatic for the People, Tori Amos with Little Earthquakes, and Prince again with his 1992 album, the so-called Symbol album.
Yeah.
Then 1993, Ben
into March. Oh, here we go.
Simon's Dream was in this, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, Ben was getting back. Ben was getting his credibility back here with Björk, the debut from Björk, A Storm in Heaven by Verve,
he went for that one.
Course, and Smashing Pumpkins.
It's just the way my trousers are hanging.
Smashing Pumpkins, Simon's Dream. That was Ben.
Solid choices there.
I pulled it back there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I went with U2 and Zooropa, Counting Crows, their debut album, August and Everything After, and another debut from Liz Phair, Exile in Guyville.
Okay.
So 94. Wow,
I don't know what Ben would have went for here.
Well, he did have, believe it or not, a definitely maybe. He definitely did go for that.
Go figure.
Green Day's Dookie.
Oh, God, I forgot to put that in.
Yeah. And another one-word album title. You went for Dummy by Portishead.
Oh, brilliant. Do you know what I was thinking about the other day? And I was thinking, did I put Dummy in? And I did.
You did.
That's good news.
I also had another one-word album title in 94. Had REM's Monster. I brought back Neil Young again with Crazy Horse for Sleeps with Angels, and then the not officially debut, I think it was his major label debut, Beck with Mellow Gold. 95, of course, Ben had What's the Story, Morning Glory. He also picked Radiohead's The Bends and Pulp's Different Class.
Yeah.
So he was top of the Britpops that year. I'm not sure.
That's good. They had The Bends in there because I was going to say that should have been in there.
I do love that album.
Probably the three biggest British albums of that year, I would have thought. I was a bit transatlantic. I had Neil Young again with Mirrorball, Supergrass with I Should Coco, and I picked a Smashing Pumpkins album for that year, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
Yeah.
So that's 95. 1996, Ben went with Matchbox 20s. Does that have a title? I've just written down Matchbox 20.
Yourself or Somebody Like You.
Yourself or Somebody Like
You.
You.
The program.
Went for
Manic
Spice
Street
Girls.
Preachers, Everything Must Go.
Yeah.
So you had Manic's Everything Must Go, and then Everything But the Girl with Walking Wounded.
Oh, I did put that in. Oh, thank
I went with an all-American trio,
Wilco
being there.
I thought they were a supermarket, weren't they? Like Poundland.
Yeah. My third choice from... Was it the third one? Yeah, it was the third one from REM, New Adventures in Hi-Fi.
New Adventures.
And Beck's Odelay from Beck.
Odelay!
You have gone Beck and Young heavy.
Yeah.
You have gone Beck and Young heavy, haven't you, in your 90s?
I did in the 90s. 97, Ben had Stereophonics, Word Gets Around, Robbie Williams, Life Through a Lens, and, of course, Oasis Be Here Now.
Shocker.
I went with some real old legends in 97. I had the Rolling Stones' Bridges to Babylon.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind. And
Nostalgic Fest.
And the youngest band I had still started in the 80s. It was Primal Scream with Vanishing Point.
We every time we mention Bridges to Babylon, Rolling Stones fans out there, brains melt.
They don't like it, but I do still like it. I don't know whether, looking back, should it have been on my top 3 of 97?
Yes.
I know I prevaricated a lot, but we'll have it on there.
Yes, it should have been.
Right, 98, Ben had The New Radicals, Maybe You've Been Brainwashed Too, Pulp, This Is Hardcore, second choice from Pulp, and another Robbie Williams one, I've Been Expecting You. I had 2 women in mind. So first of all, I had a band, Mercury Rev, with Deserters Songs.
Yeah.
And then Madonna with Ray of Light, and Lucinda Williams, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. Yeah. 99. The final year, what did Ben do? Stereophonics, Performance and Cocktails.
Yeah, it did, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Santana with Supernatural. And Cooler Shaker, Peasants, Pigs, and Astronauts. Was it the title that you just liked too much?
So it's a good album, to be fair. Yeah, good album, yeah.
So I came in for 99 with another one from Jeff Tweedy and the Boys, Wilco with Summer Teeth, and then another veteran, would you believe it, Tom Waits with Mule Variations, and finally the Flaming Lips and the Soft Bulletin.
Can I just say on that Flaming Lips one?
Yeah.
I've just bought it.
You have?
On 12-inch. I've already got it on CD. I found Yoshimi Battles the Big Pink Robots the other day. Battles. And, but yeah, I bought it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
there we go.
The question, Sam, is what 2 albums that are not on that list that really ought to go into this tournament?
And MC Hammer.
I think we're... Ben did have the Bends, and he did have...
I did have the Bends.
Screamadelica in there. But we were saying it was our personal favourites, not what we think is the greatest album necessarily. So if we had to choose the greatest or most important, then it would have been different.
Well, just a quick one. I take it, Sam, yours is still shown as recording. You don't have the orange dot in the corner. We could have some voids. Technical mishaps.
It won't affect us.
Do.
I'm recording the whole thing. Let's hope you're on it, but we don't know whether you are.
If it's not, there's going to be some really annoying gaps in the middle of this show, isn't there?
Well, I don't know, because I don't understand why.
We're just gonna jump off for a minute. Technical issues, ladies and gentlemen. If anything can be said, Philster, once again about our show is
it all happens in the moment, basically.
It's like live TV. It's like that time when Sean Ryder was on TFI Friday.
Yeah, we record it, but all the mistakes get left back in.
Yeah. You are Chris Evans, and I'm like Will.
I've forgotten about that, Will. I forgot about him.
That?
He was the guy with the glasses. Was he a producer or something?
Yeah, he was a producer. Remember Freak or Unique and all that sort of stuff?
I remember Freak or Unique.
Yeah.
Ugly Bloke.
Ugly Bloke, yeah, that was a good...
Right.
Oh, here we go.
Hopefully I'm being recorded.
Is he being back? There is an orange...
Yeah, you can see.
He is back.
Look at my name. Look.
So where were we up to? We were.
Hopefully I'm being recorded.
Hopefully being recorded.
Yeah, I don't get this.
You have an orange dot in the corner. I didn't notice that disappear. I don't know at which point you disappeared, Sam. Well, we may not have heard anything from you on the whole show.
No, it was up there for the first half an hour.
No, it was up there a little while ago. I just clocked it at that moment. It was. So.
But anyway, I need to...
Yeah. Well, we were just saying while you were off, you probably don't remember TFI Friday, but it was very much our TFI Friday moment, that one. So, anyway.
Yeah, so I better squeeze these in before I get unrecorded again. So, for 1992, I'm going with Curved Doppelganger. And I think this deserves to be in there.
Tell us about that one.
This was not on our radar, really.
Yeah, and I'm going with this.
Say. No. I think Sam did message me this one, isn't it?
So I'm going with this because
yeah,
it's like an industrial album where there's a bit of shoegaze in there, swirly guitars and fuzz and reverb, all of that good stuff. But there's a real dance element in there. It's like EDM.
Yeah.
The drums are really pushing you and not pushing you, but just the drums are pulsating through you. Really, really hard drums, danceable. And Tony Halliday, beautiful singer, beautiful woman, incredible voice. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that was on my YouTube shorts. Yeah,
based on the name. We should say Ben thought she was a man based on her name, not
pretty forgivable. That name like Tony. Yeah, but this is Dean Garcia was the other guy, and they were the nucleus of the band, and he did stuff with Dave Stewart from Eurythmics in the 80s. So he already had the kind of industry experience. And plus they had Flood and Alan Moulder producing it. And Flood went on to do the U2 albums in the 90s. So, it's got some big people around this album. And I think it's great because it sums up the 90s, I think, in terms of sound. It's got the dance side. There's even a bit of hip-hop on their first single, 10 Little Girls. There's like a rap part that comes in like later in the song.
Is it an MC Hammer rap or is it an
MC 100 or something it was called? Don't know. That's what it says on the credits anyway. Whoever that guy is.
Oh, was it?
No, obviously it's quite a decent one. It's quite Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to listen to it because it's in the pot. Yeah.
So despite the title, there is no other album like Doppelganger.
Good one, yeah.
Curve.
Very good, mate.
I like what you've done there.
Yeah, you need to listen to it. Yeah, you're forced.
We're going to have to listen to that then for sure. I'm interested. No, I really like this because otherwise I probably may have gone forever and not listened to it.
So that's album 61. What will be album 62?
Well, almost.
Verve,
same year. Very similar kind of album as well. I reckon you're going to know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to know it, aren't you?
97.
Ready?
The only one I can think of in 97, and it's not. Would I say it's similar to Verve? Well, it can't be. It's not about OK Computer, is it? No, or is it? Or that looks a little bit like OK Computer.
It certainly is.
It's OK
This
Computer.
computer's not okay.
It is
it's
OK
not recording me sometimes. It's not.
No, it's not. And OK Computer took me till about 2017 to actually listen to it.
I actually bought it. I actually bought it about the week or so after it was released. And
I've got it on triple vinyl. I've got it on the deluxe one with all the outtakes
in the Kling film.
Like that.
I remember listening to it on holiday. I remember.
No, it's actually out. I think it's behind me somewhere.
I remember taking it on holiday. I listened to it on my Walkman in Mediterranean sunshine, which is probably not the ideal weather for listening to Radiohead, is it? You really need a drizzly, dark afternoon. But
just lost your job.
Yeah,
Car's broke down. I want to cheer the mood up. Let's put Radiohead on.
Before I get kicked off again by the computer, let's do this. So, I picked this because I think it's a good counter. It counters the Oasis Be Here Now, and it's kind of needed, I think, in a way, because you need like a serious, somber album to counter the kind of party atmosphere of Be Here Now, and
it's your friend. Basically, it's your friend who holds onto your car keys when you go out on a night out.
This is the Hangover album on the Sunday, isn't it? It takes you back to reality. Well, it could be the Monday morning one when you go back to work, something like that. But anyway, I think that's
I think you're right to put it in there, Sam.
Yeah, I don't want to be like a critic, like Pitchfork.com. You know, I'm not trying to. Obviously, it's gonna be a critic's choice, but I'm trying to, like you guys, I'm trying to do it from a fan's perspective. But I still feel, you know, I would be listening to this a lot if I was there. You know, if I wasn't in my nappies in '97, this would have been I would have been listening to it quite a lot, I think.
In nappies at the age of 4.
Playing with my car mat or whatever. Then
it would have made you fitter, happier.
Yeah.
You'd have been fitter, happier.
I do.
See what Phil did there.
Yeah, I do like that album, but one of the reasons I didn't choose it was because I wasn't highly invested in it at the time, and it's something I've grown into, but I haven't grown to love, if that makes sense. I enjoy it, but I don't love it. But I understand it better for what it is now.
First track, Airbag. It
wasn't Be Here Now.
It actually, the drum samples are from
Phil's nickname.
Introducing. They sampled DJ Shadow Introducing from '96. Yeah, the drum part.
Is that right?
Well, we spoke about him.
Yeah. I've always wondered about the drum part on Airbag because it's got a weird kind of sound to it. It's actually a sample. It's not actually a recording
taken
of a live
from
kit,
DJ Shadow's Introducing, which is
it's kind of a sample thing.
So it's a sample of sample, basically. Because isn't that album Introducing? That was all samples, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't it the first album to do it? Yeah.
It's a total sample album. Yeah. I think so. I believe that was the correct.
And you got Paranoid Android, obviously, and
I didn't know.
I like DJ Shadow.
I thought they just recorded the drums in a weird way. I didn't know they'd put a sample on Airbag. That's totally blown my mind.
They recorded them with an octopus.
Yeah, true story. Look it up. And Paranoid Android, I mean, I've watched that Jules Holland performance on YouTube, and Johnny Greenwood's just like, you know, what planet are you on? That's what I was thinking. You know, he's just completely ripping it up there on the solos.
Yeah.
Have you seen the performance that they did at Glastonbury? Was it 97 or 98? They performed Paranoid Android at Glastonbury. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
one?
It's all on the tube. Yeah,
that must be on YouTube somewhere. That's a good one as well. Yeah. I remember that from the time. I remember watching it on TV live at the time.
What planet is this guy on?
At the time, I was thinking, oh, why am I listening to Radiohead for? It just sounds arty-warty.
I think OK Computer is the great balance, really. I think they did it perfectly. Like Dark Side of the Moon, really. It's that perfect kind of pop and accessible and arty hybrid.
Yeah. Is it
in
a
a way,
better album than?
Sorry,
is it a better album
kind of
than the Bends?
Yeah, it's more complex,
kind
definitely,
of the dark side of the moon of the 90s.
I can play most of the songs on the Bends on guitar, whereas OK Computer, I struggle a bit. It's more weird chords and stuff, weird time signatures as well, rhythms. But I think that, yeah, I think that there's a lot of stuff that's come true as well. I think with in a lyrical sense, you know, with technology taking over AI and the chaos of politics and what other themes are there? Corruption. Yeah.
Wanting to be abducted by aliens.
Still relevant, yeah.
Being pulled out of an air crash. I can't think
let down.
What other lyrical themes there are. Not being
let down
not
and
being
that.
surprised.
Well, let down's important because I think social media kind of ruined communication, the way people meet up and that in person. So they got that right because it's let down and let down.
Says
and
three men
around,
talking over the internet,
crushed like a bug in the ground. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
that's right. And then there's also the computer
more
voice
productive,
thing, fitter, happier, which is again
fitter, stronger,
still probably quite
faster,
relevant.
stronger, or whatever it is.
That's a pretty good impression. Yeah.
So yeah, cool stuff.
Sorry, there's an S missing off the end of this. So yeah, well, to be fair, good choices. Well, one of them is. I don't know the other ones. I'm going to have to listen to it. So I've just made a sweeping statement there that counted for nothing, really. So, but it gives us something else to listen to. It throws another one into the mix, and it means I've got to listen to OK Computer again.
So there you go. View a Curves cult album. Is it a cult album? It kind of is, isn't it? Doppelganger. You don't hear about it so much now, do you? Doppelganger from Curve, and the might of Radiohead's OK Computer. What other albums should be on our list, or should have been?
There's only space for two more.
What should have gone on instead of MC Hammer and Criss Cross? Let us know.
Nothing. In
the comments.
What? Can I just ask one serious question before anybody out there in internet world? Yeah, you, Dave, especially you. Before anybody starts slagging off MC Hammer and Criss Cross, probably two of the greatest albums ever by Criss Cross and MC Hammer.
Ben, yeah.
So put that in your pipe
aggressive,
and smoke
that was.
Yeah. And the back catalogue of MC Hammer and Criss Cross, these two are the pinnacle. So I'm not having any of your abuse. So stick your comments down there, and then I'll find you, and I'll give you Phil's address, and you can go pick on him.
So there you go. As far as Ben's concerned, if you don't like Criss Cross, you can jump.
Oh, yeah, he's good at this, isn't he? He's very, very good at this. Yeah.
And MC Hammer obviously cannot be touched, but
no, he cannot be touched. But I pray.
Oh. No, another bad one that went over your head there, didn't it?
I'll tell you what,
I will do. Cannot be touched, Ben. MC Hammer. Really.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what I will do.
You've got to pray just to make it to date. That's why we pray.
I'll tell you what, Ben. I'll tell you what.
Sorry.
I will listen to the MC Hammer album. I'll tell you what.
We got no choice.
I'm not going to listen to the Criss Cross one, but I will listen to the MC Hammer. How can you
make an informal choice if you don't listen to it?
Okay, we're going to listen to that. But
what are you going to do if MC Hammer comes up against Criss Cross?
I'm going to give B&Q Spanner again
which one goes through.
See what I did there? You got MC Hammer and you got B&Q Spanner. Or B&Q Spade or something.
Spanner. So that's Phil's YouTube name. B&Q Spanner. Sorry, Phil. So all I've done this show is pick on you. I do apologise to anybody
is
out there.
Is that anything different to a normal Phil and Ben show?
No, it's not. And anybody out there watching, bullying in the workplace is not acceptable unless that person is an absolute knob jockey.
It's just as well we don't get paid a penny for doing this, isn't it? Really,
it is. Yeah.
Well, viewers, that's it.
Good.
That's as far as we've got. We have 62 albums from the 90s. We will draw them out and discuss them in our own inimitable way.
Yeah, no
Sam,
worries.
thanks again for coming on. It's always a pleasure. And and we will have you
unless
back
the
on
night
again
shift
at some
doesn't
point
get
in the future, no doubt. But for now, indeed. Thanks for watching. Take care. All the best.